Former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell has died from COVID-19.
Inside Colin Powell's abandoned home, his wife, 3 children, tragic death and the legacy he left behind. He was a 4-star general, a trailblazer, and the first Black U.S. Secretary of State. Colin Powell's name commanded respect around the world. But behind the medals and milestones was a deeply personal story marked by service, sacrifice, and ultimately sorrow. Now, years after his passing, his once proud home sits eerily quiet, a haunting reminder of a man who shaped global policy, yet lived with quiet dignity away from the spotlight. What happened to the house, the family he loved so fiercely, and the fortune he left behind? In this video, we step inside the private world of Colin Powell, exploring the life he built, the values he passed on to his wife and 3 children, and the legacy that still echoes through the halls of power and history. Don't go anywhere, because this isn't just about what he left behind. It's about understanding the life of a man who gave everything for his country. He broke barriers, he shaped history, he led with quiet strength and unwavering conviction. This is the story of Colin Powell, an American icon whose journey took him from the gritty streets of the South Bronx to the highest halls of power in Washington, D.C. A 4-star general, the first Black U.S. Secretary of State, a man whose life was defined by service, resilience, and trailblazing leadership. But behind the medals and official titles lies a deeper story, one that's rarely told. In this video, we peel back the curtain on the man behind the legacy. You'll discover the hidden chapters of Powell's life, the career that made him a national figure, the mystery of his abandoned home, the quiet heartbreak surrounding his final days, and the financial legacy he left behind. When Colin Powell passed away in October 2021, he left more than memories. He left a powerful example and a net worth estimated at $60 million. Over his 35 years in the military, Powell climbed to the very top, becoming one of the most respected leaders in American history. With a pension nearing $200,000 a year, his influence didn't end with retirement. Far from it. After leaving the Army in 1993, Powell became a commanding presence on the speaking circuit, earning up to $100,000 per engagement. In the year 2000 alone, he brought in a staggering $7 million from public appearances. And his words didn't just inspire audiences, they filled bookstores. His memoir, My American Journey, landed him a $6 million advance, with royalties that continued to flow in. His second book, It Worked for Me, added even more to his literary success. But Powell wasn't just a man of words, he was a man of vision. He joined the venture capital powerhouse Kleiner Perkins as a strategic advisor and sat on the boards of major companies like Salesforce and Bloom Energy. In 2018, his stock holdings in just those 2 companies were valued at over $24 million. Powell's financial success reflected something deeper, the enduring respect he earned not just in uniform, but long after he'd hung it up. Born on April 5, 1937 in Harlem, New York, Colin Luther Powell was the son of Jamaican immigrants Maud and Luther. With both African and Scottish ancestry, his roots were as diverse as the country he would come to serve. Raised in the South Bronx, he worked at a local children's furniture store while attending Morris High School. He wasn't born into privilege, but he was born with grit. That grit took him to the City College of New York, where he earned a degree in geology in 1958. It was there that Powell made a decision that changed his life, joining the ROTC. That single choice launched him on a path that would eventually shape the course of American history. From his early deployment as a 2nd lieutenant in West Germany to the jungles of Vietnam, where he served 2 tours and survived a helicopter crash. Rescuing fellow soldiers from the wreckage, Powell lived by a code of courage and duty. For that act of heroism, he was awarded the Medal of Valor. His story is one of drive, dignity, and quiet heroism. And yet, even in death, there are parts of his life many have never seen. This is the untold story of Colin Powell, one of courage, controversy, triumph, and legacy. And you're about to hear it like never before. After returning from the battlefield, Colin Powell wasn't done growing. He headed back to school and, by 1971, had earned an MBA from George Washington University, laying the groundwork for the next chapter of his remarkable journey. His rise in Washington began quietly but powerfully. Under President Nixon, Powell was chosen as a White House Fellow in the early 70s, a prestigious honor that opened doors to influence and higher stakes. As his reputation for calm leadership and strategic thinking grew, so did his responsibilities. He served as senior military assistant to Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger, and then moved into a key role as Deputy National Security Advisor under Frank Carlucci. Then came a defining moment. In 1987, after the Iran-Contra scandal rocked the Reagan administration, Powell was appointed National Security Advisor. It was a historic move. He became one of the highest-profile black leaders in American government at the time, but he was just getting started. Under President George H.W. Bush, Powell achieved what no one like him had before. He was promoted to 4-star general and became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the youngest ever to hold that role, and the first African American. From 1989 to 1993, he oversaw major military operations, including the U.S. invasion of Panama and the swift, dramatic victory of Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. But not every chapter was triumph. When President Clinton took office, Powell began to feel out of sync with the new administration. Tensions with key figures like Defense Secretary Les Aspin and UN Ambassador Madeleine Albright signaled it was time to move on. He stepped down in early 1993. Even in retirement, Powell didn't rest. He turned his focus toward America's youth and giving back. In 1997, he launched America's Promise Alliance, a nationwide effort to support children through education, mentoring, and service. That same year, he founded the Colin L. Powell Center for Leadership and Service at his alma mater, aiming to uplift underrepresented students and cultivate the next generation of civic leaders. Then, in 2001, history called once again. President George W. Bush named him Secretary of State, making Powell the first Black American to hold the role. It was a heavy time. The September 11th attacks had just shaken the nation, and Powell became central to the U.S. response. He built global support for America's fight against terrorism and helped make the case for the Iraq invasion. But in that mission came what he would later call a blot on his record, the now infamous speech to the United Nations, where he presented flawed intelligence about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Though he delivered it with conviction, the information was wrong, and Powell carried the weight of that misstep for the rest of his life. After the fall of Saddam Hussein, Powell focused on rebuilding alliances and stabilizing Iraq. But by 2004, his time in the Bush administration had come to an end. Still, he didn't fade from public life. He joined Kleiner Perkins, one of Silicon Valley's top venture capital firms, and hit the speaking circuit hard, appearing on the Get Motivated tour and even openly criticizing parts of the administration he once served. Through it all, Powell remained an influential voice in both politics and business. And then came a quieter chapter. In October 2022, nearly a year after his death, the Powell family's longtime home in McLean, Virginia, a stately colonial tucked away in one of DC's wealthiest suburbs, were quietly sold for just under $3 million. It wasn't flashy, it didn't scream power or wealth. Instead, it reflected the man who lived there, elegant, composed, and private. The nearly 6,000 square foot home sat on a lush acre of land and featured 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and thoughtful touches like an indoor hot tub and sauna, personal sanctuaries for a man who spent decades in the spotlight. But there was something haunting about it too. The house had reportedly been emptied for some time before it hit the market. It's unclear when Powell and his wife, Alma, last lived there full-time, but parts of the home seemed untouched in recent years, as if the walls still held whispers of a life lived with purpose, but also with the kind of quiet reflection few ever saw. From soldier to statesman, from a boy in the Bronx to a global figure, Colin Powell's story isn't just about power, it's about legacy. And we're just beginning to uncover all the layers of the life he left behind. Step inside and you immediately feel the balance open. Airy spaces paired with warm, inviting details. The heart of the home, the living room, rises dramatically with 18-foot ceilings, creating a space that feels both grand and serene. The main level was designed for easy living, with 2 bedrooms including a spacious master suite, ideal for comfort without having to climb stairs. Head upstairs and you'll find 2 more bedrooms, a cozy loft, and a playful nook that hints at a home once alive with laughter, kids, and cherished moments. Throughout the house, rich hardwood floors guide you from room to room, and wide-open living areas give it a sense of freedom and flow. One of the quiet gems is the enclosed sunroom, facing the backyard, a peaceful retreat where you can sip coffee and watch the seasons shift across the Virginia landscape. But this wasn't just a house. This was Colin Powell's sanctuary, a place that mirrored his spirit, calm, grounded, and designed for reflection. Away from the spotlight and public stage, this was where the general could simply be Colin. Even after retiring from a life of service at the highest levels, Powell never stopped giving. In fact, his heart turned even more fully toward others, especially America's youth. In 1997, he launched America's Promise Alliance, a massive effort that united more than 400 organizations around one goal: giving young people the tools and support they need to thrive. The mission was built on 5 promises, guiding every child toward caring mentors, safe environments, healthy beginnings, strong education, and the chance to give back through service. One of its boldest efforts was Grad Nation, a campaign with a clear goal: raise the national high school graduation rate to 90% by 2020. It was ambitious, but so was Powell, and his belief in young people never wavered. That same passion led him to create the Colin Powell School for Civic and Global Leadership at City College of New York, where his own journey began. It's a place that empowers students from underserved communities to become global thinkers, public servants, and changemakers. But his generosity didn't end with his own initiatives. Powell gave his time, resources, and voice to causes like Smile Train, Children's Health Foundation, and Anata Mini ACP, always with a focus on child welfare, healthcare access, and human rights. His compassion reached far beyond U.S. borders, especially in Africa, where he supported projects that fought hunger, fueled development, and opened the doors of education to communities in need. Colin Powell believed that true leadership isn't about titles or power, it's about service. It's about lifting others, and his legacy lives on not just in the history books, but in classrooms, communities, and lives he helped change. Behind the headlines, behind the medals, Colin Powell was, first and foremost, a devoted husband and father. He married Alma Johnson on August 25, 1962. For more than 60 years, they were each other's rock, weathering life's highs and lows with unshakable loyalty. Their bond lasted until Alma's passing in 2024, just a few years after Colin's own. Together, they raised 3 children, each carving a unique path in life. Their son, Michael Powell, became a prominent figure in American policy, serving as chairman of the FCC from 2001 to 2005, helping to shape the digital age as we know it. Their daughter, Linda, followed her passion for the arts and built a successful career as an actress on both stage and screen. Anne-Marie Powell, though more private, also found her own direction outside the public eye. Powell's personal life, like anyone's, had its complexities. In 2013, his name briefly made headlines again, not for politics or policy, but due to leaked emails between him and Romanian diplomat Corina Crețu. A hacker had accessed Powell's AOL account, stirring rumors of an affair. Powell responded with candor, confirming a long-standing email friendship, but firmly denying any romantic connection. The buzz faded quickly, unable to tarnish the deep respect he'd earned over decades of service. Faith quietly guided Powell through life. A practicing Anglican, he didn't wear his beliefs on his sleeve, but they anchored him, providing a steady compass through war zones, global crises, and public scrutiny. In his final years, Powell faced some of his toughest battles, yet not on a battlefield, but in his own body. He was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a blood cancer that compromised his immune system, and early-stage Parkinson's disease. Though fully vaccinated, he tragically succumbed to complications from COVID-19 on October 18, 2021, at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. He was 84. News of his passing reverberated across the nation. Tributes poured in from leaders on both sides of the aisle. President Joe Biden called him a patriot of unmatched honor and dignity. 4 of the 5 living former U.S. presidents honored him as an American hero. One exception stood out: former President Donald Trump, whose statement acknowledged Powell's death but took sharp aim at his politics, branding him a classic Reno Republican in name only. Still, the overwhelming tone of remembrance was one of reverence. Powell's funeral at the Washington National Cathedral was a solemn, high-profile gathering. Presidents Biden, Obama, and George W. Bush attended, as did First Lady Jill Biden, Michelle Obama, Laura Bush, and Hillary Clinton, who was there on behalf of her husband, recovering from illness. It was more than a farewell. It was a tribute to a man whose influence transcended political lines and personal beliefs. He was laid to rest with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery, In Section 60, Grave 11,917, a sacred resting place reserved for America's most distinguished service members. Powell's legacy is etched not just in stone or metals, but in the fabric of American history. He was honored with the nation's highest civilian awards, including 2 Presidential Medals of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal, the Presidential Citizens Medal, and international recognition for his diplomacy and leadership. Universities across the country granted him honorary degrees, recognizing not only his achievements, but the values he lived by: duty, honor, service. Colin Powell's story is one of resilience and quiet strength. A man who rose from the streets of the South Bronx to the highest halls of power and never lost his sense of purpose. If this journey through his life moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Let's continue honoring the legacy of a man who stood for something greater than himself. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.